Hey, listener. Welcome back to another deep dive. Today, we're tackling something that's both kind of fascinating, A&D, a little bit creepy. You ready for this? Robots taking over everyday jobs. I know, right? And get ready for a curveball, because the inspiration for this deep dive, it's actually an English language learning video. Can you believe that?
You know, it sounds unusual, but this video, what if robots took over jobs? It's actually pretty clever.
Yeah.
They use this futuristic scenario, right? And they use it to teach vocabulary and grammar. Sometimes those kind of quirky approaches, well, they can really make you think in a whole new way.
You know, that's totally true. This video really paints this vivid picture. It's a world where robots are doing, like, everything. Serving us food, teaching our kids, driving us around.
Yeah, and they even have this one scene, it's a robot, right? And he's trying to deliver a package, but he gets stuck on the stairs.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine? That's like a classic robot struggle, right?
Yeah, it is. And it's actually a clever way to highlight, well, you know, one of the limitations we have right now with robotics, like we've made huge leaps in AI and automation. But some things, like navigating these unpredictable environments, well, that's still a major hurdle for robots.
It's true.
It's a good reminder that even in this future world they're creating, robots, well, they're not going to be perfect right away.
It definitely makes you think, doesn't it, about what it would really be like for robots to just take over our jobs. The video actually does a great job of breaking down some of those key vocabulary words, like robot, automation, AI, task, and efficient. And it even gives these simple sentences, which is perfect for, well, you know, people learning the language.
And even though the definitions are straightforward, they actually kind of open the door to some pretty deep concepts. Like, for example, the video defines AI as machines that can think and learn. But honestly, that definition, it barely scratches the surface. There are all sorts of different types of AI, and each one has like different levels of complexity and capability, right?
Right. So like some AI systems are amazing at specific tasks, like playing chess or even recognizing faces. But they're nowhere near close to, well, actually replicating the kind of general intelligence we humans have.
That's exactly where it gets really interesting.
Because the video actually tackles those big what-if questions.
Yeah.
And they use something called the second conditional. That's a grammar term, by the way. But they use it to explore these hypothetical situations. Like if robots took over jobs, people might have more free time.
I think it's fascinating they use that specific grammar structure. It's not just presenting like facts about robots, you know, it's actually encouraging viewers to actively like imagine those possibilities, the good and the bad.
It's true.
It's a really subtle way of getting people to think critically about, well, you know, this future that's coming at us pretty fast.
It's like sneaking in a philosophy lesson disguised as language learning.
Exactly. And that's what makes this source so interesting to me. It's not just teaching vocabulary, it's making us really think about, you know, like the bigger implications of relying on robots more and more.
Yeah. Like what does it mean for our jobs or the economy?
Even our definition of what it means to be human.
It's mind-blowing. The video even asks viewers some pretty direct questions, like, what would you do with all your free time if a robot did your job? Or what jobs would robots just be terrible at? It really gets you thinking, doesn't it, about your own place in this future world.
I love those questions. They sound so simple at first, but they actually force us to confront like some really deep assumptions we have about work and leisure and the value we put on different skills.
And speaking of skills, the video ends with this amazing challenge. Write a short story about a day in this robot-filled world.
It's brilliant.
It's a fantastic way to encourage viewers to, you know, use their new language skills and at the same time explore their own imaginations.
It really shows the power of storytelling as a learning tool. When we create those stories, we're not just passively absorbing information, we're actually engaging with the ideas and exploring different perspectives and really making meaning out of these, you know, complex concepts.
Okay, so we've touched on the basics of the video, but honestly, I'm ready to dive a little deeper. The video talks about robots doing all sorts of jobs, but the one that really grabbed my attention was the idea of robots behind the wheel.
Ah, yes, the self-driving car. It's a concept that's been captivating us for decades, and we're getting closer and closer to that reality every year. But it also raises some, you know, some pretty tough questions.
I know, right? On the one hand, who wouldn't love to sit back and relax?
Yeah.
Well, a robot just chauffeurs you around, right? But on the other hand, the thought of a machine, you know, making these life or death decisions on the road, well, it can be a bit unsettling.
Oh, absolutely.
What'd you say?
The technology behind those self-driving cars, it's incredibly complex. It's this sophisticated mix of sensors and algorithms and AI. But even with all of those advancements, there are still some major challenges, especially when it comes to safety and ethics.
It's true.
Like, how does a robot car decide who to protect in an unavoidable accident?
It's like straight out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
Except it's happening right now. I'm also curious about, like the impact on jobs. What happens to all the truck drivers, the taxi drivers, the bus drivers, if robots start taking over those roles?
That's a huge GE question. And it goes way beyond just the transportation industry, too. I mean, as robots get more and more capable, they're going to disrupt, a whole bunch of professions like manufacturing and retail, healthcare, even creative fields.
Wow.
And that brings up all these economic and societal questions that we need to be talking about.
And it's not just the practical stuff either. There's this deeper, like, philosophical question about the role of work in our lives, If robots take over all the boring tasks, what does that mean for our sense of purpose, our identity?
It's a good question.
Like our place in the world?
It's almost like we're standing on the edge of this brand new world, right? Full of possibilities, yeah, but also full of uncertainties.
That's true.
And it makes me think of that final challenge in the video, the one where they ask viewers to write that short story about, a day in this robot-filled world.
I wonder what kind of stories people are coming up with.
I think those stories can be super insightful. They let us explore like our hopes and fears about the future, to imagine different scenarios and really wrestle with, the ethical and social implications of having all these advanced robots around.
I'm picturing stories about robot companions, robot chefs, even robot therapists.
Oh, yeah.
Like the possibilities are endless. But I'm also thinking about, the downsides. Like, what if robots get too powerful? What if they develop their own consciousness and decide they don't need us anymore?
Those are those classic sci-fi tropes, right? But they do tap into some of those deep-seated anxieties about technology and like our relationship to it. It's important to remember, robots, well, they're tools. And like any tool, they can be used for good or for bad. It's up to us as humans, to guide their development and make sure they serve our interests and values.
That actually brings up another really important point.
Yeah.
Ethics. As robots get more sophisticated and, more integrated into our lives, we really need to set some clear ethical guidelines for how we design and use them.
Absolutely.
We need to think about questions like, how do we make sure robots are used safely and responsibly? How do we prevent them from being used for harmful purposes, like, surveillance or warfare? How do we protect human rights and dignity in a world where robots are just everywhere?
These are really big questions, and there aren't easy answers.
It's true.
But it's so important that we start asking them NW before the technology gets so advanced that it's too late to change course.
I completely agree.
We need to have these thoughtful, nuanced conversations about the role of robots in our society. And it's not just scientists and engineers who need to be involved. It's ethicists, policymakers, and really the public as a whole.
This video, as simple as it might seem, it's actually a really great starting point for those conversations. It's making us think about the future, right?
Yeah.
And the possibilities and the choices we have to make.
And it reminds us that the future of robots isn't something that's just happening to us. It's something that we're all creating together.
So listener, as you're listening to this deep dive, I really encourage you to think critically about the role you want robots to play in your life and in the world. What are your hopes? What are your concerns? And how can you use your voice and your actions to help shape a future that benefits all of us?
It's a powerful reminder that even with all of this rapid technological change, we still have the power to shape the course of history.
It's amazing to think about how much power we really have as consumers, as citizens, to kind of influence where technology goes from here,
I agree.
When we talk about robots taking over jobs, it's easy to just focus on like the UGE changes.
Yeah.
But what about the smaller stuff? Like the ways robots are already impacting our everyday lives.
Yeah.
The things we don't even really think about.
That's a really good point. We tend to picture robots as like, these futuristic human-like machines. But honestly, robotics is already a part of so many aspects of our lives, and we often don't even realize it.
Okay, so like what? Give me some examples.
Well, think about your smartphone. I mean, it's basically a tiny robot in your pocket, right? It's packed with all these sensors and algorithms that help you, navigate and communicate and access information.
That's true.
And then there are the algorithms that leak. They control our social media feeds. They recommend products to us. They even personalize our news.
Wow, I never thought of my phone as a robot before.
Right.
But you're right. What about those those robot vacuum cleaners. Seems like everybody has one these days.
Exactly.
They're making life a little easier.
Those are great examples of how robots are already automating tasks and freeing up our time, right? Even in those like really ordinary ways. And as the technology keeps getting better, well, we can expect even more robots, right? Coming into our homes or workplaces.
The video we're talking about, it focuses on this world where robots are doing all these different jobs, from teaching to driving to serving food. I'm kind of curious, what are some of the jobs that experts think are like most likely to be automated in the near future?
That's the million-dollar question, right? It's something that economists and futurists are debating right now. The jobs that involve like repetitive tasks or data processing or predictable physical movements, those are the ones that are most likely to be automated first.
Okay.
So think about factory workers, truck drivers, data entry clerks, even some aspects of healthcare and legal work.
That's a pretty wide range of professions. It makes you wonder, like, what happens to all those people? The ones whose jobs are replaced by robots.
It's a valid concern. It's something that policymakers really need to be thinking about now. Some experts argue that, automation will create new jobs, just like all the previous technological revelations have.
Right.
But others are worried that this time it's going to be different. Like the pace and the scale of this revolution, it might be unlike anything we've ever seen before.
Well, I see.
And that could lead to, widespread unemployment and even social unrest.
It sounds like we need to be ready for some pretty big changes in the job market. The video mentions that, we might have all this extra free time if robots take over our jobs, which sounds amazing in theory.
Sure.
But what will we actually do with all that free time?
That's a question that's both exciting and kind of scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
Some people imagine this future where, we have all this leisure time and we can pursue our passions without having to worry about work.
That sounds pretty ideal.
But others worry about, what if we get bored or apathetic? What if we feel isolated because our jobs don't define us anymore?
That's a good point. It's like we're standing on the edge of this whole new world, right? Full of possibilities, but also uncertainty. It reminds me of that final challenge in the video, the one where viewers have to write a short story about a day in this world full of robots. I wonder what kind of stories people are coming up with.
I think those stories can be so revealing. They let us kind of explore those hopes and fears we have about the future and imagine different scenarios and really grapple with, the ethical and social implications of this technology.
I'm picturing stories about, like, robot companions, robot chefs, robot therapists.
It's fun to imagine.
Like, the possibilities are endless, right? But I'm also thinking about the potential downsides.
Sure.
Like, what if robots become too powerful? What if they, develop their own consciousness and decide they don't need us anymore?
That's a classic sci-fi fear, right?
Yeah.
But it speaks to some very real anxieties we have about technology and our relationship to it.
Yeah.
It's important to remember, robots are tools. And like any tool, they can be used for good or bad. It all comes down to us, We're the ones who have to guide their development and make sure they're used in a way that benefits humanity.
That brings up another important point, and that's ethics. As robots become more advanced and more integrated into our lives, we really need to be thinking about those ethical guidelines for their design and use.
Absolutely.
We need to be asking questions like, how can we ensure that robots are used safely and responsibly? How do we prevent them from being used for, harmful purposes like surveillance or warfare?
That's right.
How do we protect human rights and dignity in a world where robots are becoming more and more prevalent?
These are tough questions, and there aren't easy answers.
It's true.
But the important thing is that we're having these conversations now before it's too late to course correct. We need to have this open dialogue about the role of robots in our society. And it can't just be scientists and engineers having this conversation. We need ethicists, policymakers, and everyday people to be involved.
This video, it might seem simple on the surface, but it's a fantastic starting point for these kinds of conversations. It's getting us to think about the future and the possibilities and the choices that we have to make.
And it's reminding us that this future with robots, it's not something that's just happening to us. It's something that we're all creating together.
It really does feel like we're on the verge of something totally new. Yeah. And it makes those questions from the video even more interesting. Like, if you could have a robot do one thing to make your life better, what would it be?
It's funny how such a simple question can really reveal what we value most, you know?
Right.
Would we go for pure convenience, like a robot to do all the chores? Or maybe something more creative, like a robot that could, I don't know, compose music or paint a masterpiece?
Ugh, I'm torn. Part of me wants a robot chef, just whipping up these amazing gourmet meals. But then the other part of me wants a robot massage therapist to just work out all the kinks after a long day.
That sounds nice.
But seriously, thinking about that question, it makes me realize just how much of our lives is already influenced by technology.
It's true. And as robots get even more advanced, well, that influence is only going to grow. It's not just about what they can do for us. It's about how they might change, how we work, how we learn, how we play, even how we interact with each other.
The video talks about robots freeing up our time. But I wonder if there's a chance that they could actually make us even busier.
Oh, interesting.
Like if we're always connected to robots and AI, will we ever really disconnect?
No.
Truly relax.
That's a good point. We kind of see that happening already with our smartphones and social media, right? It's this constant stream of information and notifications. It can be really hard to just tune it all out.
It's true.
Now imagine that, but amplified, with robots constantly at our beck and call.
It's almost like we need a whole new set of etiquette rules for interacting with robots.
I like that.
Like, when is it okay to ask a robot for help? And when should we just do things ourselves?
That's a fascinating idea. And it really highlights how important it is for us to be in control, to have agency in this relationship with robots. We need to be aware of how we're using the technology and make conscious choices about how much we let it shape our lives.
This whole conversation has really got me thinking about how important education is going to be, like critical thinking skills,
Yeah.
In this new world we're talking about, if we're going to be living alongside robots, we need to understand them, how they work, what their limitations are, and how to, interact with them safely and ethically.
I agree completely. We need to prepare future generations. To navigate this, well, it's going to be a complex world, right? And that means teaching them not just about the technology itself, but also about ethics and philosophy. And those critical thinking skills you mentioned.
It's like we need a whole new curriculum for the robot age. Maybe that's where that writing challenge from the video comes in, getting kids to think critically and creatively about robots. Maybe that'll help them be more prepared for whatever's coming.
I like that. Who knows? Maybe some of those kids will grow up to be roboticists and AI experts and ethicists who will shape the future of this technology.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We talked about the basics of robots and AI and, what it might mean for society. If this technology keeps evolving at this pace, we've explored the potential benefits, the challenges, the hopes and the fears that surround this whole idea of, robots becoming more and more a part of our lives.
And I think through all of that, we've gained a better understanding of both the power and the responsibility we have as we shape this new world.
Listener, if you're intrigued by all this, I encourage you to keep exploring this topic. Read some books, watch documentaries, talk to experts, and most importantly, don't be afraid to ask questions.
The future of robots, well, it's not set in stone. It's something we're all creating together. Through our decisions, our conversations, even our everyday choices.
So as we move forward,
Right.
let's approach this whole thing with a sense of wonder, but also, with a healthy dose of critical thinking, because ultimately the future is ours to imagine and ours to create.